Well, thank you for coming to my session. Based on the fact there was other better options available, like Malcolm next door talking, which is the same, in essence, the same company. So, you know, I think most of you probably know, but I haven't heard of Keysight. Anyone here heard of Keysight apart from the people I was drinking with last night? Those don't count, right? But close. So I've actually left the questions. If you want to do some Slido questions, I'll probably take them as we go along, or however that works. It's literally just Slido and then TAD. So yeah, so like I said, let you take that one before it disappears. That's the only question I'm going to get, which is, why did you try and do 45 slides in 45 minutes? And I think the answer is there's a lot to get through. But I promised Baz, because he can't be here, I don't think, that I would record it so he can watch it later when he's not so busy doing stuff. So yeah, so like I said, you know, it's interesting that what you probably can partially see in the backdrop is that's the original garage. That's, you know, the birth of Silicon Valley, shall we say. So 1939, just over there in the backdrop is where Hewlett and Packard started building test equipment. And that same company, nearly 100 years down the line, is Keysight. And it's also, I guess, OpenText next door, if you're next door, right? You know, we're both heritage HP companies. You know, I started my, I guess, automation adventure back in the 1990s, which ages me slightly. Started with XRunner back in the day, and 4 decades later, I'm still here, right? So as you probably know, I was keynote at Automation Star last year with Dorothy, who was my mentor back in the day when I started my automation journey off. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of share where things are going, right? And I know agentic, in essence, is the most exciting topic for this year. So probably a maybe overhyped topic, but I wanted to kind of get some fundamentals. I wanted everyone to be able to take away from today how to actually get started with this. So I'm going to share a whole stack of Git repositories and stuff that you can do. You know, most of this came from yesterday, literally me and Jason Arbon going backwards and forwards going, how do we build something if you're a test automation engineer today and actually start getting value from this? So no tool vendor talk, it will just be open source, what you can do with the latest tech, right? So let's take that journey back a little bit. And I also put, which I will edit out for the camera, I put in some rants as well for this year. So I literally put these slides together in the hotel room this morning, which is why I didn't get out of bed till like 12 o'clock or whatever it was. But, you know, I did this TED talk probably about 8 years ago called Cognitive Engineering. And, you know, 8 years ago predates, I guess, the large language models and generative AI tech capabilities that you started hearing about in 2019. But also it was more about fundamental machine learning, I'm going to call it classic AI for a second, or traditional AI. And like I said, it was just out of coincidence, really, is where I live. I'm from New Zealand originally, but where I live at the moment is just a few miles away from Bletchley Park. Now, I think most people probably think about Turing as the godfather, I suppose, of artificial intelligence. Those papers that stood there behind me are some of the original works on the singularity and some of his early works on artificial intelligence. To me, that journey's been continuing, right? And I did get into an argument with Tariq on stage at Star West last year about the fact that AI, in essence, has been quite linear from that date to about here. And I guess everyone thinks it's been exponentially going up in the last few years with generative capabilities. But as we cover off, really they're just a subset of machine learning capabilities. So in a way, it feels like it's there, but actually it's been ongoing. So deep learning and all the other technologies are still going at the same kind of rate. And a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes that I made in this slide, a much younger version of myself, done less conference speaking at that point in time, was the areas that we thought AI was going to dominate in weren't exactly what actually happened, right? We kind of thought musicians, and I can't see it, but over here it would have been musicians and artists would have never been touched or never been impacted by AI. But in actual fact, they're the ones that we see, like Sumo.ai and all these other platforms that generate audio, visual kind of capabilities. I don't know if anyone saw, is it Fun? It's one of the new Chinese ones called Fun something vids. and it's literally next generation video generation, a bit like what runway.ai used to give us last year. It's on steroids this year, right? And you know, most of my R&D guys, which are either based out in the Valley or in Oxford, Cambridge, a lot of quantum guys, a lot of astrophysicist guys, we're working on a lot more Chinese-based language models than we used to do, because they are just emerging. And this isn't me just saying DeepSeek, because, you know, yes, it wiped $1 trillion off the US stock exchange, but it's these bigger implications of that. So I know when I did my talk in Star West back in 2012, I said this quite scary fact that 2,012 years is spent reading emails every day just in the US. And that terrified me. And it kind of terrified me to the point where I was like, we need to do something about this digital grind, all this work, this stuff that in theory you don't need to be doing, you know, replying to emails, dealing with, you know, logistical project management type tasks, right? We spend a lot of time doing some tasks which I don't think really add the full value. And that's why I wanted to bring up Agentic. And I also wanted to kind of start on where I think this year is going to be huge. And, you know, it's easy to look at something like Stargate and go, well, the US are buying a whole stack of AI infrastructure. Well, why are they doing that, right? It's not because everyone wants to buy CUDA cards. It's because there's going to be AI workforce replacement, and it's about AI productivity capabilities. And every company, probably everyone here, has had some experience with GitHub for Copilot or Cursor.com, some platform that helps you do activities that you do on a daily basis, which are being a target for improved efficiency, right? And in a way, you know, this has been targeting testing, I suppose, less so than development. Development has definitely seen this huge impact in, okay, the developers are using it, we've seen the impact on code quality, we've seen these numbers, and this is just by chance. I was at a Google DeepMind event, which wasn't 2025, it was quite a few years ago, and I put this number about 35%. Now, that was our marketing team just going a little bit crazy, and I came and revisited these, and last week, or actually it was the week before, I was with Diego from Forrester. Diego, Italian guy, lives out in Turin. He started talking about generative AI back in 2019, pre the original launch of ChatGPT, and he kind of came up with these predictions. He called them Turing bots as a nod to Alan Turing, but he talks about taking advantage of Turing bots would potentially look at a 15 to 20% productivity. Now, if I talk to people at GitHub or GitLab, they're all trying to tell me the same thing, but usually they start adding crazy numbers like 60% productivity improvement. I don't think that's really the case. But what this does really say, and I kind of agree with what he said back in October, was actually the real value is cross SDLC. So it's developer tools, tester tools, not just used by testers. So we all heard the term citizen developer before, right? And that's, or developer experience. The idea is to enable your development team to be even better. Nobody talks about tester experience, about having an integrated testing environment, apart from Paul Gerard, who always talks about this stuff. But really, if, like Jason created testers.ai, and he sent me a build yesterday where literally at the command line you type in testers, and then you pass in your application, it just goes off and tests it. So it generates roughly about 2,500 tests, from accessibility to security to non-functional performance. It just runs everything, right? And then comes back and says, here's the state of your application or platform. Now, yes, that's valuable, but actually he's targeting that for teams that are developers, and this kind of move towards SDEDs, software developers in tests, which has been going on for a long time, and obviously Google has stopped doing that, which is where Jason came from. You know, part of it is you should be able to use these cross SDLC. And I maybe labored the point a little bit too much there, but I do see that these tools, and this is where Agentic starts going in, and I kind of quickly say to this gentleman at the back, which I've somehow missed your name off there, I think you're on another slide, is Agentic isn't agents, right? It's not agents and it's not bots. For some reason, there's a lot of ranting on LinkedIn where people are saying, even though he's called them Turing bots, so that's just Diego's fault for a second. But they're not bots, right? And they're not agents. if you go back to large agentic models, LAMs, that's what large action models are now known as. But the word agentic is really about building a framework around, or an architecture where there's thinking, sensing, and acting aspects of short and long-term memory that allows the coordination of a number of different agentic-based systems to talk to each other. So you could have, in essence, a idealization tool that's talking to a design and build tool. They should all be able to interchange and talk. And this is where the CEO of NVIDIA said that he expects it be a 10-to-1 ratio of people to agentic endpoints. So it should just be, humans should be augmented into that loop, and they should become much more efficient. So first of all, they are definitely not bots, and I do remember my days at Microsoft using the Microsoft bot framework, probably about 15, 20 years ago for Domino's, and we made the mistake at the time to test the Kinect system to allow you to make a bigger or smaller pizza. You know, if anyone remembers, the Xbox used to have this lovely split screen capability where you could watch TV and also order a pizza whilst gaming or whatever you were doing. But, you know, I do think we need to add these different layers, this thinking and creating layer, and this was a publication that I put together about 20 years ago, and it was based on that same diagram which you saw in the backdrop on the TED talk. So people keep asking me about the kind of, well, what are the use cases? I'm going to get into some of the technical stuff soon, but I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about where I've been kind of spending and focusing some of my time, but also kind of trying to define, well, where should, and suddenly these technologies are actually really quite useful when they start looking at narrow use cases that will potentially add value. And what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to show you, is some of the technologies which my hand was a little bit steadier, around things like large vision models and large action models, which I genuinely believe are going to be game-changing this year. And I'm also going to give you some repositories where you can literally download it and run it, even on this laptop, which I know is slightly cheating because it's got a Copilot button on it, which means it's got an NPU on it, which is a neural processing unit, which means it's designed to actually run an 8 billion model locally on that offline, right? And yes, it's about $700 from Dell, but I wouldn't buy one because it keeps on crashing on me. That it's not got enough memory, right? But you know, these technologies now are designed to run, and Copilot isn't ChatGPT, right? Yes, it might have a variant of OpenAI that runs in a tenant in AWS, in Azure, but actually Copilot is about, spoiler alert, automating your desktop. So there's a platform called Copilot Studio, which is in essence a process mining tool. So for those keen-eyed people who are using Windows, you'll notice if you turn on your sniffer that it's sending GraphQL messages to Microsoft Graph. What's Microsoft Graph? It definitely doesn't do graphs. It's literally a big knowledge graph. So it's sending transcripts of Teams meetings, it's sending, you know, activities that you do on your daily basis. And so it's starting to build up contextual understanding about your organization. And so without anybody knowing, or maybe somebody here knows, but I don't know. So therefore, I've also seen this shift around AI assurance, around whose responsibility is it to validate these AI-infused systems. And a couple of years ago, out of the back of the ISO 29119, Part 11, artificial intelligence, software testing of artificial intelligence. But that document is how to test AI-based systems and the regulatory stuff that's coming into play. So very much like the 9,000 and whatever it was for quality standards, this is the next thing. Now, interestingly, there's only 7 companies in the world that are 42,000 accredited, one of them being AWS. So, you know, it's definitely worth a read if you get bored on the flight / bus / bike home. So, you know, my team keep on, problems about how we audit our AI-based systems. So part of it is, since 2017, we've had TensorFlow and, you know, Adam optimization algorithms in our product, but we need to be able to explain this and provide evidence that we're testing it and that, you know, it's been audited, you know, we're going through all the different safeguards that we need to do. This is real. You know, as much as Trump said that he's not agreeing to the European Union AI Act, which came into force The 2nd of February for AI literacy, which means everyone here should have been enabled by their organization and received training on how to best use these systems. But then in October this year, the AI liability comes in, which means you can be fined silly GDPR numbers if you do not provide this information. So it's quite interesting, but also quite scary. Also, you know, it was quite funny because so I made a bit of a mistake. I made lots of mistakes in this presentation. But back in 2022, I was told by this guy on the right-hand side, who's the CIO of our company, he said, build me a generative AI platform in 3 months, was originally what he said. And then it turned into 6 months. And then I managed to get this out just in time for Gartner, which is, but what you'll see there, if you are kind of keen-eyed, is that I made 3 mistakes. First is I thought it was going to be a really good idea to create a aviator-type chat interface, which we called Eggy because it was our branding, brand police. I also thought, which was the wrong thing, that prompt engineering would also be the future. That kind of backfired on me quite quickly. And then the next one was around autonomous code generation. So I thought, stupidly, that because the language which we've got, which is 20 years old, doesn't require any type of object identification using computer vision, it'd actually be really easy to generate an automation, and it was. But nobody cared. Nobody cared about code generation tools because you can do that very easily, right? So even though we brought a product to market, nobody wanted it, which, you know, isn't the first time that I've done that, or it probably won't be the last time, right? Because we were running with scissors. We thought we could build something that would be what everybody wanted. And then again, the panel discussion last year with Jason, Tariq, everything else, they were like, we've all been training you on prompt engineering classes, which we've done really well. And then now we're saying to you, don't learn prompt engineering. Now that's not completely true, because part of it is prompt engineering, prompt tuning, prompt threading, whatever you want to call it for a second, is a useful skill. It's just evolving exponentially, right? People know of DeepSeek not because it destroyed the US economy and started putting everything on top of, the Chinese pulling out better quality models, was people started thinking about chain of thought. Now, chain of thought's been around for 18, 20 months. It's been in other tools, not just DeepSeek, but actually chain of thought is evolving exponentially. And so anyone use 3.7 apart from you? For Claude? Perfect. And you'll notice when the release happened 2 weeks ago, they said they're using it for tests. And they started talking about test-driven development. They talked about being able to create automated scripts. Anybody using Claude computer use? So that's and you can't put your hand up for that either, is the desktop ability. So you can literally go onto it and say, play me Taylor Swift, which is my normal demo when I run these workshops, and it will look at the screen, and it looks at YOLO, and it goes, oh, wait a second, you're running a Mac. Is there Spotify on the bottom? And the answer is no, because I'm too tight, I don't pay for Spotify. So it then goes, okay, well, I can't see Spotify, can I see Apple Music? No, I can't. Okay, I'm gonna load a browser up, I'm gonna go to YouTube, and it navigates through, and it's going through, it's learning as it goes through. It's not only learning, but the whole point of the agentic capabilities is passing the feedback to the long-term memory to say, if you can't see Spotify, try this. And it's create a blueprint of navigation through. So these technologies are evolving so quickly, and I'm gonna show you one. I might even do a live demo, which never do live demos, never work with children or pets, is the 3 only options I usually do. But like I said, when we started this problem, we then went back out and everyone does this unfortunately, but they said, we went back out, got IDC to run this report, and interestingly enough, even though autonomous code generation is about 43%, but part of it is he's saying that automation still sits around 22%. Now that's quite interesting because it's been that same number between 22 and 24% every time I've seen that. And most companies will say, well, we've got 70%. And I think, yes, it's an average. Not everyone's that mature at automation at scale, but it's not just automation that's the challenge, right? But this is the software engineering hype curve. Now you'll see at the top, which is a bit of a reason why you kind of guess why the analysts have decided to make a quadrant out of it, is AI augmented testing is literally the hottest thing on the list. And yes, this is a few years old, and I will show you, this isn't my slide, this is Jason's slide. And I keep on saying to him, did you build this? And he said, yes. I still don't believe it, but part of it is what he was trying to say was that actually, will the amount of manual testing disappear? No. Will the amount of automation testing increase? Absolutely. But it will be at the same kind of pace because of the amount of extra code coming through with the code generation tools through dev, that actually proportionally people are still going to be in as much demand as they were. So it's not like suddenly these technologies are going to come over and you won't need to do traditional test automation like I've been doing for 4 decades. You still will. So I said I was in Forrester, and whenever there's a whiteboard, very similar to this one here, which I've not secreted on yet, but part of it is I always love a diagram, right? So and I'd like to say these are work of arts, but they're not. But what you can see here, and I have used the word agentic testing in the corner, which is definitely incorrect, is within this plan, sense, grow, learn, act, reason, memory. These are the foundational components of what agentic requires. And those people who are keen-eyed, you'll also see that both here we've got the vision and actions models, which I'm going to be showing you later on, and then things like chain of thought, visualization of thought, and also for my next week's talk around edge and NPUs for things like the NVIDIA Slash. I've seen people showing Raspberry Pis with NPUs doing edge capabilities as well, but a lot of vision capabilities. And then also you probably can see, you don't want spatial reasoning, but behind me is also one of my pet hated words of the year. Last year was model gardens. It's like grow your own model gardens. And I made a bit of a mistake. I don't always predict things absolutely correctly, but I didn't really think that this was going to be a big thing, which was this idea of creating domain-specific models. Now, the idea with a domain-specific model, which has now just gone absolutely crazy, is you would have a specific fine-tuned model for healthcare, or for aerospace and defense, or for Salesforce, or for whatever. And of course, one for testing, right? So this is one of the kind of questions is, should you be building these models? And then again, there's the normal argument around, well, what do you feed into it? And I'll kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. But agentic AI is definitely not generative AI. Generative AI is a tiny, tiny piece of this puzzle. I don't even think it's here. I think it might just be a tiny, tiny segment. So this is, I don't know where he is, but the guy who I was in Lisbon with just before Christmas. And I put this architecture up, which is the same architect schematic that we follow. And if you download AI Ops from Microsoft Git repository, which is the wrong name for it, but for some other reason, Microsoft aren't very good at naming, it builds this entire framework with all different components, with like data lake house architectures, like all the different individual components are all built into that repo. But you'll see within that repo, one of the ideas, the word that I don't like, the model garden bit in the corner, but also this multi-agent system. They can't get away from the idea that there is agents, which are computer use automation or computer use agents, as the term would be, which are multi-capabilities. None of this should be wedded to any kind of particular technology, and things are continuously evolving. Jason keeps on saying, it's so hard to keep up. Everything changes, but some of the foundational components don't change. So within here, you can see things like the knowledge graph or Microsoft graph. You can see that, yes, it makes a lot of sense to do RAG architecture, retrieval augmented generation, relative retrieval generative answering, right, from data sets within a combination of both vector databases, which is in essence just flat data, and also graph-based data, which is really important. And so these graph-based RAG architectures, which feel like they're still quite generative, they then need all of these act, plan, coordinate, and the shared memory capability, so they can learn over time between, I'm not calling them agents even though everyone else is, but between the different systems and subsystems. So, like I said, I was completely wrong about the idea that domain-specific poly-edge AI LLaMs were going to be a thing. Not just a mouthful, right? By the way, poly and polyamorous is the correct term. Again, Gartner's use case, which is saying that every model should be chosen at runtime. So what you'll probably see here, if you were unfortunate enough to attend one of my workshops, is the large language model router there typically is designed to choose up to a number of different models to run simultaneously. So you would have a vision model, an action model, and a large language model all running, which is when suddenly that laptop's not enough and you have to justify to your boss to buy a new Alienware, or as I started using my 5070 yesterday, which was happy days. But part of it is we use at the moment 56 models. One of those, which is 8 times 120 billion mixture of experts models, are the common ones that you see, right? So everyone says, oh, well, I use a generic model like LLaVA or something like that. The mix of experts models are proven to be pretty good, but only at language, right? You need to be able to have combinations of these, and that's why suddenly it goes beyond large language models, right? That was when I was at Microsoft HQ, and then I was also not allowed to tell that Clippy's coming back this year, which is going to upset a lot of people, which I know 1996 feels like a long time ago. So the first repo of the day is operator.browserbase.com. Now, I don't know, anyone use this? It's quite upsetting because it feels like that's the end of my test automation days done. It's literally, you can just navigate to browserbase.com, put something in, and it will just use reasoning to test your application, right? It's free, doesn't cost anything, and then more importantly, all you do is just go to that repo, pull it down, of course, load cursor, because have loads of problems with the repo, getting it running on your local machine, but it will run everything in a browser proxy or onto some cloud, Source Labs, Lambda, whatever, very quickly, and it is quite good, right? But again, this is what we saw with OpenAI Operator, so which is why it's the same name. They're just hiring every Selenium person in the Valley, and within that, they are literally trying to build not this what looks like a 1990s reboot of being able to test a web page, which people like, who cares? But if you use Claude computer use, it's obviously desktops, and they were released pretty much in, well, Claude computer use has been around for probably 6 months in beta. But this, which you can see on the left-hand side, it's going through, it's doing the reckoning, it's trying to understand how to navigate, it's learning from it, and then it eventually just goes through and does the exact activity. And it's called computer use, is running it on desktops, obviously it's a Linux box there. And then you can see Microsoft Operator, it is in essence now Microsoft Operator, but Operator, which is so this is what I did build, and this is me was dancing on stage in India on that particular one. That's why I'm a little bit out of breath. But the idea, and you can tell for the keen-eyed of you, realize that actually wasn't part of it, because I didn't agree with the idea of doing domain-specific models and doing fine-tuning against a particular model set. But you do need not only customer information, so context is king, so you need to be able to learn this stuff. And you'll also see from my last example, which I know I'm getting told off that I'm overrunning, is the way you get higher levels of automation is, of course, we're all used to the page object model, right? We're used to that idea of pulling information that's embedded within a web browser or a WebSocket or whatever. But what happens when you start using a desktop app, right? Use a desktop app like Oracle, or you build your own Java-based, I'll say Java because I'm trying to give some credit over there, but Java's going to need to take off again, JBoss. But anyway, part of it is it's never seen that application. So people were kind of saying, well, lambs are going to be rubbish. They were about 22% when ChatGPT V launched back last year. They're now about 97%. And that is as far as 2 weeks ago's research that's just been published. The only reason it's 97% is because if you're testing Salesforce, you feed it all the Salesforce documentation. It knows how to navigate Salesforce. It doesn't care that there's a shadow DOM elements in there that I can't see, because it doesn't care. It's using vision models. Model gardens, absolutely essential. Everything has to be offline. Don't use ChatGPT. It's the easiest one to sell everyone a license of nothing. Knowledge graphs, like Microsoft Graph, are just bread and butter now. You need to be able to deal with the different type of retrieval at different stages, and that's also agentic. Agentic stops it starts doing something called late retrieval mechanisms, which means it only brings data in at the last second. It doesn't bring all the data sets in. So you don't want a vector database with 10 gig of data in there, because it's just no use. It's too much information. It becomes large again. AI TRiSM, massively useful. Steal the Microsoft stuff is probably the easiest way if you Google it. DSMs and these edge-based systems, hugely popular and hugely powerful. Computer agents, I think these are just going to go off the rail. Once Microsoft decide to show you what they're doing, which in essence is Pi, Auto, GUI under the hood, but in essence will drive anything else on a Microsoft platform. So Adobe, it has its own automation API in essence, right, which will say, upload a video like I did today, do some special effects, do some AI noise generation, edit it, turn it into TikTok format, publish it. It will just do it all. It'll drive the application. For everyone here, they're like, been doing that for years. But now it's Copilot Plus is supposed to say, press button, do me a power pivot of information in my Excel based on customer numbers from Salesforce. And it just will go off and do it, and you'll see it doing it in front of your eyes. And that's what Copilot's all about, right? Vision models, massively important. This slide is already out of date because I'm going to show you UI TARS was our favorite. So UI TARS, as you can see there, is Pi Auto test, Pi Auto GUI underneath, but this still relies on some CUDA capability, which unless you've got dedicated AI infrastructure, it doesn't really help. But you'll see in the top corner, it benchmarks pretty well. I'm going to give you one more link before I get thrown out of this room. Is if you ever want to just accelerate your automation and just never do anything again, Omniparser is your answer to the problem. Is that Microsoft Omniparser will turn into the stuff that Operator and everybody at SAM and everyone at OpenAI is building. So that's really quite interesting. I say that really quickly. AI Ops Labs is the framework from the Microsoft stuff. What I said, don't reinvent the wheel, just use that. I love Databricks, but I just can't be bothered to do it. Don't worry about that. This is a really complicated slide, and I'm realizing there's no time to actually do this, but what you'll see here is this is actually Microsoft's platform, which is on the right-hand side, which if I press the magic play button, because I can't use PowerPoint because I don't have a PhD, is on the right-hand side. You'll see that it's using YOLO V12 or 14, I don't remember the new one, to look at what the state of the actual desktop is. And it's using that to push in from the large vision model into the large action model as contextual information. So every time it's going, oh, where am I? Oh, where am I? And then passing all those information points in to give it the contextual semantic information. So this, in essence, is the blueprint. And then what you see on the top right, which is OpenAI's stuff, is they're also watching it side by side. So they're actually looking at observing the behavior, which is why, what was it called? It was a total recall. An open recall was going to take screenshots of everything you're doing on your PC, but then people got in trouble because you could just log in as an administrator and see what everyone's been doing, which was quite naughty. The Tay is not on there for that one, unfortunately. So again, I'm sure I'm massively over time, but neurosymbolic programming, just to make it easier for people, that's just high abstraction levels, which means you don't have to give the same level of detail, which is why I can pass stuff to Jason's platform. He can then run it for me. So quite good technology. Like I said, one more slide before I get thrown out. So this is Omniparser, and by the way, swap it to this, it's broken. I don't know why the latest version is broken, but that was my laptop on the train yesterday, and this was me testing Jason's platform with it, and then realizing I've run out of memory on my laptop as I went through, because you need a bigger boat. But Omniparser is pretty impressive, and you will see the latest drop happened two weeks ago, or maybe 2 days ago. So that's the easy way to not have to do automation again. And with that said, I think I am not wearing a cape in any more roundtables, which is definitely one good thing to do. I'm not going to tell you about the Babel fish thing, because I think most people will be like, I don't want to hear about Babel fish and any more Hitchhiker's Guides to the Galaxy references, Jonathan. But in essence now, like everyone does, you can run multiple languages, Markdown, Python, VBS if you're next door with UFT, all in the same script. So you don't The language syntax doesn't really matter. Of course, Python's the one of choice because that's where most of the information's been trained. But you can convert it backwards and forwards. No one cares about DeepSeek, Jonathan. And then finally, before I let everyone go, and then go, why didn't you just, when she flagged you 5 minutes ago, why didn't you actually just finish then? So that I could actually go to the toilet between my next session. But what you'll see when I did my keynote is I asked Jason to run automation star through his system. And then I'll finish with Marcel yesterday, who decided to change my shirt. And thank you very much, and hopefully you enjoyed that.